Hello and welcome. I hope you're safe and well. In today's exciting episode, I make a tweed jacket out of my Mediterranean tweed, which I bought like 4 years ago, and I'm only now making into a jacket.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
This is a very, very gorgeous tweed, and it's got sort of strips of furnishing fabric in there, all different sort of furnishing fabrics, as well as some lace and some yarn and all different things. It's a lassage style tweed, meaning it's very, very delicate and falls apart if you even so much as look at it. So I kept putting it off because as soon as you cut into it, you know, chaos ensues. Anyway, so because it's such a delicate tweed, well, I back all my tweeds, but what I'm going to do is interline it with, so stitch it to another fabric. And once the two of the fabrics are bound together, I'll treat them as one layer of fabric. So this is netting. You can get it at any big fabric store. It's quite cheap. It's only a few dollars per yard, but it's so completely worth investing in. So I've cut out 2 bits of each. The jacket pattern I would recommend is Vogue 7975. This is a slightly different discontinued pattern that's got mistakes in it. And yeah, it's just easy to get Vogue 7975, but this one has slightly wider sleeves and I'm doing beading, so I need just that little bit more room to move when I'm attaching the beads. Anywho, so I cut out 2 of everything, 2 sets of all the pieces. It's a 2-piece sleeve plus 2 pieces on each front and 3 pieces on the back, which is the same as the Vogue 7975. So here we have the back pieces. And as I said, I cut out 2 sets because I'm going to do heavy beading over it. But if you're just making a tweed jacket and you want to use backing layers so that your jacket doesn't sag over time, then I would just use 1 layer. Anyway, so there's 3 pieces on the back, the center back and back left, back right. Side back left, side back right. So you pin them together at the notches and then you fill in all the other pins. So there we go. They're all pinned together and ready to machine sew. So we'll set that aside and we'll do the front pieces. We've got front left, front right. In the front there is the center front piece. You can see sort of the neckline curves down, and the side piece which has the bust bit and then also the underarm. So again, you just pin them together at the notches and then very carefully pin out from there. Okay, our front left is 1 piece now, and our front right is 1 piece. So now I'm going to get the back together and we are going to machine sew all of these. I have cut out the sleeve pieces, the upper sleeve and the under sleeve, but you actually attach them separately to the fabric and then machine sew them together. Whereas with the torso of the jacket, the front and the back, you create this shell and then you drape the tweed over that, and that's how you get the good pattern matching. So here we go. I have machine sewn all the 3 back pieces together, and then because, as I said, I'm doing heavy beading on mine, I want it to be able to maintain a lot of weight. So I'm going to do a corset style seams. But if you're just doing a regular jacket, splay the seams open and hand stitch each seam down on either side, because if you push all the seams out to the side and then machine sew over them, you create sort of a corset bone. And personally, I'm doing heavy beading, so having those corset bones all around the jacket are actually desirable. But if you're just doing a regular jacket, not so much. It'll be too formal and too structured. So yeah, I mean, you kind of just want the netting to be there so that your tweed won't sag. You don't want it to be like a corset or a, you know, straight jacket. Anyway, so I machine sewed, I turned the seams to the side and I machine sewed them. So next what we have to do, I also need to cut bits. So the front center inside bit of the jacket is also, see how it's also tweed? So most of the lining is silk, but the front centerpiece is tweed. It just makes the jacket age better, and it also looks better. So right over on the left there, you can't really see, I've also got my center lining pieces. So now it's time to lay out the tweed, and this is what the back of the tweed looks like. How you straighten tweed, because it's such a loosely woven fabric, is you put one hand at the top of your tweed and one hand at the bottom of your tweed, and you sort of stretch it out diagonally, and then you put your hands in the opposite corners and stretch them out again, and that's how you get it neat and straight. So first piece you do is the back piece, and you line up the center back piece. As I said, the back has 3 pieces. The middle panel lies flat, and it's the 2 outer panels that give the back of your jacket the volume or the curve in the shoulders. So we're going to pin the center back panel first, and then we'll do the other ones. So you line it up at the bottom. See how I've lined it up on one of the colorful strips? Well, you just line it up and make sure that it fits right at the top of the bit of fabric. And so that's why I've chosen this line, because it just fits. And then you pin it straight across the bottom, just the center panel, not the 2 side panels, just the center panel. Once the whole of the bottom is straight and pinned, then the center of the back panel, just run your pins up and flatten it with one hand, pin, flatten it, then pin, and do the whole of the center middle, and then go out from the center middle, sort of halfway between the center middle and the side of the center back panel, and do a row of pins up again from the bottom right to the top, and keeping it flat, and then do another row on either side at the seam and of the center panel. You're still only working on the center panel. You've got to get this one flat before you can, well, it's called draping, but before you can shape the other 2 outer panels. The center one has to be flat and it has to be perfect. So once that is done, then the next thing that you do is you do the outer 2 panels, and the easiest spot to start on the outer panels is your natural waist. So before you make a tweed jacket, you have to make a mock-up. So just put the mock-up on, the cotton mock-up, and your natural waist is, if you bend from side to side, that's your natural waist. Your actual waist is lower, but your natural waist is the bit where you bend. So start pinning there. It's just higher than you think it is, basically. Start pinning there, and then from what I do is then I pin the bottom part after I've done the center, the waist, and then I pin up to the top. And once I've done one, I do the other side, and there we go. It takes forever, because you sort of have to just gently tease the bit of fabric into shape, because you sort of have to mold it as you go. It's called draping, but yeah. And then once you've done the back, just put as many pins in as you want. You're the only one who's going to see it, and you're going to stitch the 2 together and take the pins out eventually. So once you've done the back, then you do the front, and you find the same space in the pattern, so that colourful line, and you line up the centre front pieces. I line up one centre front piece and then the second centre front piece, and you pin those, and basically the 2 center fronts have to have a straight line down the middle of them, so it's pretty easy to figure out whether you've got your center front pieces right or not. So once you do the 2 center bits, they're the flat ones in this scenario, then you do the shaped piece, which is the side front piece. So yeah, this is me just showing you, I pinned the very edge of the center fronts to make sure that the fronts of the jackets are nice and straight. and then I did the whole of those center front panels, and then I did the two outer bits that give the shaping for the bust and, you know, the shoulders and everything. So it does take a long time to pin it, but you know, that's how you get a perfectly matched pattern across the whole of the front and the whole of the back. So yeah, here we go. I finally finished it. The bit around the armholes or the sleeves does take a while. And then, as you can see, I've got loads of fabric left to do the sleeves. And when you're doing the sleeves, you always do the outer sleeve first, the two outer sleeves first, and then you do the under sleeves and the two inside fronts of the lining last, because, you know, you've got to pattern match as best you can. So yeah, I only bought a yard of this fabric, so there is a limit to how, like, there is a pattern match right across the sleeves, the front of the torso, the sleeves, the back of the torso, which I'll show you at the end, but it's not exactly, yeah. Anyway, so once you've pinned them all in place, you, if it's a really delicate tweed, I'd recommend stitching the two layers together first and stitching around the edges. But if it's just a regular tweed, then you can cut it out and then hand stitch the two layers together. You also have to turn it over, so this is the correct side, and you just have to check that, especially with a really loosely woven tweed like this, some of the bits pull, like some of the bits of lace stick out or they twist. So you just have to turn it over before you do all the hand stitching and check that everything's in the right place. Otherwise you'll have to cut your hand stitches, tie them off, fix the tweed, and then redo it. And then here we have my sleeves. Someone asked, how do you get the sleeve, the stripes on the sleeve or the pattern on the sleeve correct? The sleeve has a straight bottom. So as long as you line up your pattern straight on the bottom of the sleeve, well, if you're using a Vogue 7975 or this McCall's one here, which is very similar to the Vogue 7975, yeah, they have the sleeves have a straight bottom, and that is how, and when you stick the sleeve onto the jacket, it sort of rotates a tiny bit, so you don't have to do any of that calculation. It's just in the pattern. There is a particular way. So if you've made your cotton mock-up, basically you you draw the lines on your cotton mock-up, then you unpick all the stitching, and then you trace out your cotton mock-up pieces, and that's how you get, if you've got a really big plaid, that's how you work out where the lines are. I'll do another video about that, but what we're looking at now is the fronts, and I'm adding the front, just pinning in the center front piece of the lining. So the rest of the lining will be silk, but we have to attach this center front piece now so that we can do the edge, like sew the edge of the center front. So I've got to pin them, and I've also finally stitched the sleeve tweed to the sleeve netting. So now we can actually do now I'll treat them as one piece. So we have the upper sleeve is the big bit and the narrow bit is the under sleeve. So we pin them together, and the sleeve bends at the elbow. So yes, when I cut them out, the sleeves looked like the patterns matched perfectly, and they do in parts, but they sort of don't in some parts, and that's because the elbow is put together a certain way, if you're wondering about the pattern matching. So now I've machine sewed the arms, the sleeves together, and I've machine sewed those fronts on. Now you just splay open the seam allowance, pin it into place, and then you have to hand stitch it into place. And you do this because if you use this machine, you would see it. And it's a nicer, softer seam too when you do it by hand. So this is, I think I've done 3. I've done 3 seams by this point. I had 1 left to go. I was like, I'm nearly finished. So I finished the back one, obviously, and I turned it in the correct way. So here we go. I finally finished both sleeves and they are turned in the correct way. And here we go. I've just set them up so you can see how 3-dimensional the sleeves are. And as you can see, the undersleeve is slightly off the pattern matching, but that's because, yeah, you want to be able to move your elbows. So that's why it's put together the way it is. So I've set aside the sleeves. They're ready to be attached, but first we have to actually complete the torso of the jacket. Lay down the back of the jacket. On top, right sides together, you do the front and you pin it at the shoulders, and then you do the other front, pin it at the shoulders, making sure you keep those inside lining flaps out of the way. And then you also pin it together at the side seams, and then you machine sew them. Then you splay open the seams and pin them down, and then you hand stitch them into place. There we go. You can see I've hand stitched those ones, and while I was at it, I also just measured where the neckline was going to be, clipped the curves, and then just pinned it back into place. And now I just have to hand stitch this neckline into place. And here we go. It took forever. So I just did hand stitching once near the edge, and then I did another row of stitches about an inch deep. And yeah, so there we go. That's nice and finished so that I can bead onto it. And the last thing we have to do is attach the sleeves. This is a very tricky thing, especially when you're working with so many different layers of fabric. So you just pin the top center and the bottom center, then you pin the bottom third, the bottom 2/3, and the last third that's over the shoulder is the trickiest one. So just take your time with it. And once you've stitched, you've pinned them both into place. If you're too nervous to do it by machine, just baste them or hand stitch them into place. And then turn it out and see how, and then you use some machine if you want, or just do it hand stitching. Then once you've sewn your sleeves on, then you push the seams up into the sleeve and you pin them into place. This is obviously a different jacket, but this is just showing you. And then I do 1 row of stitch from the outsides, and then I do another row of stitching from the inside. If you've only done dressmaking before and haven't done any tailoring or worked with tweed before, that's going to sound really strange. But with tweeds, the weave is so loose that if you use a poly thread or a cotton thread, I use poly because it lasts longer, then your stitches disappear, but you get this beautiful rounded shape. I didn't have time to do these, so that's why the shoulders of these don't look as smooth as the shoulders on my other jackets. They will next time you see it, I promise. And see, this is what I mean where the sleeves are slightly twisted. I didn't do that. I just matched up all the notches on the sleeves as I was attaching them. And it just magically, all the pattern matching works out. As long as you match up your notches, everything works out. So here we go. Here's the jacket. And as I said, there is a perfectly matched line right across, but the more complex pattern doesn't match, and that's simply because I only had 1 yard of fabric. So I don't have time to bead yet, but my idea for this Mediterranean tweed is that I want to do like The Tempest by Shakespeare, that play. It's, there's a shipwreck at the start. So what I'm going to do is I've got they're like slices of shell. I've had them forever. I wouldn't buy them now, but I just bought them, gosh, it must be at least a decade ago. And I've also got all these beautiful individual unique glass-blown like hand-blown glass beads. So they're all going to be like little bits of treasures from a shipwreck. And I'm just going to bead it sort of like my dragonfly jacket or the Egyptian tweed. just going to have a lot of beading over it. I've also got these beads, they're bicone, so they sort of look like two pyramids stuck together, and they're in a ceramic colour. So I think that was going to make it look more Mediterranean, because on those Greek and Italian cities where every house has to be painted white with a blue door, and they have to have those ceramic tiles on the roof. So yeah, that is my idea for this tweed. So anyway, that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've been inspired to finally make yourself a Chanel style jacket, because they are awesome and you can never have too many jackets. I wasn't sure about using the pieces of shell or the hand blown glass beads, but I want to finally use them. I think it would be awesome. I think I'm going to have to use invisible thread to stitch them on, which is going to be an absolute pain. Invisible thread is basically nylon or fishing wire, and it's a little bit stretchy, so you have to get the tension just right or it snaps or the knot won't hold. It's very finicky, but the results are just amazing. And I don't see how, like some of the darker ones, I guess you could get away with using darker thread on them. I don't know. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks again for watching, and happy sewing.